Good morning, you're listening to the brief wake up, your mindful start to the day. I'm Handel, your daily coffee companion, helping you wake up informed, thoughtful, and maybe just a little amused before the day gets old. If you're commuting, corralling kids, or just standing in line for caffeine, you're in the right place. Let's get you caught up. This morning in health, we discuss measles on the rise. The United States is confronting a resurgent measles epidemic, with cases climbing faster than at any time since the disease was declared eliminated more than 25 years ago. More than 580 confirmed cases have already been reported this year alone, and dozens of outbreaks are spreading across multiple states. At the center of the crisis is a major outbreak in South Carolina, where health officials say nearly 900 people have now been infected, overwhelmingly children. Public health teams have quarantined hundreds of people and are racing to contain spread in schools and community settings. Additionally, measles cases have appeared in settings as high profile as Disneyland in California, prompting warnings to visitors about possible exposure and urging anyone potentially exposed to check their vaccination status. And in Texas, health authorities are responding to confirmed cases in children at the largest U.S. immigration detention facility, raising concerns about control measures in crowded, high-risk environments. Public health experts warn this outbreak is not isolated. For all of 2025, the CDC reported more than 2,200 measles cases nationwide, the highest in decades and far above recent years, largely driven by pockets of low vaccination coverage and rising anti-vaccine sentiment. Measles was once eliminated in the US thanks to widespread use of the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, which is about 97% effective after 2 doses. But vaccination rates have declined in recent years, dipping below the 95% coverage needed for herd immunity that helps protect entire communities. As vaccination hesitancy grows, so does the risk of sustained transmission, which could jeopardize the US's official elimination status, a designation granted when a disease stops spreading within a country for at least 12 months. Measles is highly contagious. It can linger in the air for up to 2 hours after an infected person leaves a room, and complications can be serious, especially in young children, including pneumonia and brain swelling. Health officials are urging parents and caregivers to check vaccination records, make sure children receive both doses of MMR, and to seek medical care if symptoms develop, usually fever, cough, and a distinctive rash. This outbreak underscores a clear public health reality. Vaccination isn't just individual protection, it's community protection. When coverage falls, diseases like measles, once thought beaten, can come roaring back. The news is next. In the news, election chaos and a power grab. Houston's 18th congressional district may be the clearest example yet of how fragile elections can feel on the ground, even before national politics step in. In just 4 months, voters there are navigating 3 overlapping elections, all while congressional boundaries are being redrawn mid-cycle. After the death of a longtime Congressman Sylvester Turner, the seat sat vacant for nearly a year. When Texas finally scheduled a replacement election, it collided directly with the start of the 2026 midterms. That meant runoff elections, primary elections, and new district maps all arriving at once. Some voters received mail-in ballots for one race while still voting in another. Others showed up early, only to be told voting hadn't started yet, or that their polling location had changed. Even candidates say they're spending more time explaining when and where people can vote than talking about policy. Layered on top of that confusion was redistricting. The GOP-controlled Texas legislature split this historically Black and Hispanic, heavily Democratic district into multiple pieces, forcing voters to relearn which district they even live in. sometimes just weeks before an election. Community leaders say the result isn't apathy, it's exhaustion. And that local exhaustion now connects directly to a much bigger national debate. Because as these state-level election systems strain under complexity, Donald Trump is floating a radically different idea: nationalizing elections. Trump has suggested Republicans should take over election administration in multiple states, arguing without evidence that state-run elections can't be trusted. That proposal would mark a sharp break from American tradition. Under the Constitution, elections are run by states, not the federal government. Legal scholars say a federal takeover would almost certainly be unconstitutional. But politically, the message is clear. At a moment when voters already feel confused, disoriented, and shut out, the answer being offered isn't simplification, it's consolidation of power. Houston shows what happens when election systems become too complex to navigate. The national debate now is whether that complexity becomes an excuse, not to fix democracy, but to control it. And that's the through line voters across the country are about to confront. The big sip is next. As we continue our Living with Absence grief series, today we focus on the concept of strong people, quiet grief. Here's something people don't talk about enough. The more competent you are, the easier it is for your grief to go unnoticed by others, and sometimes by yourself. High-functioning people, professionals, leaders, caregivers, or parents are often very good at staying operational. They go back to work, they keep the schedule, they handle logistics, they show up for meetings, deadlines, and other people's needs. From the outside, they look like they're doing okay. Inside, something else is happening. Grief doesn't disappear because you're capable. It just goes underground. Psychologically, this is common in people who are used to being relied upon. If you've spent your life being the steady one, the fixer, the provider, the organizer, your nervous system already knows how to suppress personal distress in order to function. That skill doesn't vanish when loss happens. It gets stronger. So instead of breaking down, grief often gets postponed. And psychologists have a term for what happens next: emotional debt. When grief isn't processed, it doesn't vanish. It shows up sideways, as irritability, as emotional numbness, as chronic exhaustion, as restlessness or risk-taking, as overworking, as withdrawing from people who actually care. Not because you're avoiding grief intentionally, but because you're prioritizing survival. Being strong is useful, but functioning is not the same thing as processing. High performers often tell themselves a familiar story. Other people need me. I can't slow down. I'll deal with this later. And for a while, that works. Until later shows up in another form. Burnout, health problems, sudden emotional collapse, or the quiet realization that you've been living on autopilot, carrying a weight you never put down. Quiet grief is still grief. Competence doesn't cancel attachment. It just hides the cost. One of the hardest things for capable people to accept is this: you don't have to fall apart publicly to be grieving, but you do have to give your nervous system space to register what happened. Grief needs acknowledgement, not theatrics. It needs moments where you stop performing and let your brain feel the absence without immediately fixing it, managing it, or pushing through it. Strength is not the absence of grief. Strength is making room for it without waiting for it to force its way out. If you've been functioning well but feeling hollow, productive but disconnected, capable but quietly exhausted, that's not failure. That's unprocessed loss asking for space. Grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like competence that's carrying too much, and learning when and where to set that weight down is part of healing. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. The lighter roast is next. Which version of you shows up where? Most of us aren't just one person. We're a collection of versions. There's the version of you that shows up to work, focused, controlled, efficient. The one who manages tone, filters emotion, and gets things done. There's the version of you that shows up at home, looser, more reactive, more tired, sometimes warmer, sometimes shorter fused. There's the version of you with friends, the version with strangers, the version with people who knew you before life got heavy. None of these versions are fake. They're adaptive. Your nervous system learns where it needs to perform and where it thinks it can finally exhale. But here's the uncomfortable question. Which version of you is getting your best energy? Sometimes we give our jobs the most regulated, patient, thoughtful version of ourselves. And the people we love get what's left over. Not because we love them less, but because we feel safer dropping the mask there. So we show up at home depleted, less patient, more distracted, shorter. And then there's the reverse. Some people bring their most alive, expressive self home, but bring a smaller, muted version to work. Not because they're dishonest, but because the environment doesn't allow them to be whole. So here's the real tension. Your job doesn't deserve your soul, but your family doesn't deserve your burnout. And your family doesn't need you to perform, but they do deserve your presence. The goal isn't to merge all versions into one impossible perfect self. The goal is awareness. To notice, where am I giving my best regulation? Where am I dumping my fatigue? Where am I shrinking? Where am I overperforming? Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is bring a little more patience home. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop giving your workplace the most human parts of you. You don't have to be the same everywhere. But you do get to choose where your energy goes and who gets the version of you that's actually alive. That's not selfish. That's alignment. And most of us feel better the moment we start paying attention to it. Our commemoration is next. Today, February 4th, is World Cancer Day, a global moment focused not just on treatment, but on prevention, early detection, and equal access to care. Cancer outcomes are shaped long before a diagnosis by screening, education, environmental exposure, and trust in health systems. This day reminds us that public health infrastructure saves lives quietly, long before hospitals ever enter the picture. Today is also the birthday of Rosa Parks. Her refusal to give up her bus seat in Montgomery wasn't impulsive. It was a deliberate act of resistance, grounded in years of organizing and moral clarity. It became a hinge moment in American history, reminding us that structural change often begins with individual resolve. Across the world, Sri Lanka marks its Independence Day, commemorating its freedom from British rule in 1948. It's a day centered on sovereignty, identity, and the long work of nation building after colonialism. And here in the US, it's National Homemade Soup Day, a small human observance, a reminder that care doesn't always come from institutions or policies, but from daily acts of nourishment, warmth, and attention to one another. Today's show was about systems under strain, from public health to democracy, to the quiet emotional load people carry without being seen. When vaccination rates fall, election processes grow opaque, or grief is forced underground, the damage doesn't announce itself loudly. It spreads quietly until the cost becomes unavoidable. And across all of it runs the same lesson. Prevention, clarity, and care matter most before a crisis forces our attention. This is Dr. Robinson for the brief wake-up. Be kind, calm, and curious. We will catch you next time.